Hello, everybody, and welcome tonight to a very special episode of E2KG. Tonight, I can't even say this with a straight face, gentlemen, but today we almost lost one of our own. Not not to drunk driving, not to dunk driving, right? Not to drunk driving, not to the opioid crisis, not even to the great council wars that dot our historic landscape. Today, we almost lost one of our own to social media toxicity, and through a lot of other means and methods. So tonight we're going to spend some time talking about that here on the E2KG network, along with everything else we always do every Tuesday evening here. We talk about games. We talk about games. We talk about life. We talk about the surrounding culture. We talk about why Osiris Prime is popping in and out of our podcast. But today we are going to talk about a variety of things. This is our GX show for on the E2KG network on Enough to Keep Going. I am DBQ Hams. I am joined by Osiris Prime, and thankfully, I'm also joined by Agasicles Stamos. Tonight, as I look into the camera to say that this is a very special episode, I want to turn the mic over to Agasicles to allow us to hear his perspective. And I say this with pause and a little bit of over dramatic flair, but in all honesty, this is a good topic for us to pick up tonight on as we head into E3, as we head into the summer months with people having time on their hands and maybe a little bit too much. So let's talk a little bit about where you're at, Agasicles, not only in terms of the podcast tonight, but what brought you to kind of what I could only call a breaking point.
Yeah, and I don't know that I would necessarily call it overly dramatic. This is my note. I don't know if this is going to show up. Nope, it's not. Nope, I can't get the glare down. I mean, my note that I wrote to myself this morning, and usually in my morning time frame when I'm getting ready for work is when I have epiphanies, either of things at work or things of a creative nature. Um, but Sorry, I'm still getting the social media out, and things are slowing down a little bit. In fact, what I will do here is I will.
We can fill here for a minute here if we need to as you finish that up.
Oh, no,
So
no, you're good. You're good. So as you can see here, these were my questions to myself this morning. Why keep gaming when no one pays for games? No one wants to watch streams about games you pay for. My first world problem was what do I do about my Acer 4K displays? So that's not the thing that brought me to the breaking point. Um, but uh, but these two about why keep gaming when no one pays for games and no one wants to watch streams about games you pay for were kind of my two critical points that I went through today. So and these were pretty serious. I juggled some things, and in fact I notified you guys as I started my commute home, just as a warning, heads up that this might be my last podcast on the Enough to Keep Going show. And it revolves around a lot of the conversations that I've been getting exposed to in social media, uh, probably most particularly. And man, so while I've been on this 4-year exploration into the streaming culture to go deep undercover and try and break apart what these different communities are about, there's a few things that have come up, and a lot of them are things in that are socioeconomic in nature, and they're not going to be pleasant, and some of them are going to come off as arrogant, and that's just the way they're going to be. Um, the first thing is, I guess I noticed a few weeks ago, and I say I noticed a few weeks ago. This is a few weeks ago after years of kind of plumbing these depths, is that a thing that stood out to me in very stark contrast was that when you look at the Metacritic page of the top of the highest aggregate review recent releases, that's one list of games, right? Then you look at the NPD charts and the various sales charts that come out for the preceding month. those lists are relatively in sync, or at least there's a significant amount of commonality across them. And again, it doesn't pick up on things like things that are built around season passes and things that are heavy microtransaction, right? Things like that. But and of course, when GTA 5 is in the top sales list, obviously it's not in the top highest reviewed recent releases because it's not a recent release. But you can go back to a point in time where GTA 5 was certainly on that list, right? So there's some notable statistical commonality between those two lists. That makes sense. When you look at the highest streamed games on Twitch, it is significantly askew from either of those two lists. And it heavily favors, it has always heavily favored free-to-play games. League of Legends was one of its first big things. Dota, and now Apex and Fortnite. And even when they're not necessarily free-to-play games, it also heavily favors games that you pay once and you can get thousands of hours of content out of. There's a lot of The Sims, right, that are played heavily by big streamers, and I look at that and I'm like, so there's a game that was paid for once. Maybe you bought some expansion packs, right? And then there's been several conversations that I've been around this over the last few weeks in particular. One being with a Destiny 2 player who, I mean, at best, right, at most, you most likely spent around $100 to $120 on Destiny, right? If you bought all of the DLC, if I assume that at some point in there you got a break, right? With getting a bundle on sale or something, so maybe you paid $140, $150. But here is an individual who, at least by their claim, played the game for thousands of hours, paid $150 at most, and still complained about changes that Bungie was making, still complained about content that they felt they were entitled to, and complained because Bungie was diverting attention to focus on Destiny 3. And I'm like, this is the nature of the business cycle of the industry that supports the thing that you claim that you love. Like, that's just the way it is, right? Like, television shows start production for the next season at a certain point in the cycle. Marketing, like, trailers start getting made for the next movie that's in the pipeline. Like, these are the things that happen because these things are all about making money, and without getting paid, people can't continue to make the content. Then there was another conversation that I was exposed to this week on Twitter about how, and this was a fairly sizable streamer, and a lot of other, satellite streamers around them, who just indicated that they categorically, institutionally have a program, programmatically, never pay full price for games. And some of them don't buy games at all. One individual indicated that the only time they spend money on games is with money that they've earned through Twitch. And a lot of this started causing me to have a degree of nausea for the group of people who claim that they love games. And I have a difficult time reconciling how there is a thing that you claim that you love that you refuse to ever pay for. And in some other groups, that I've been in and around, right, there's indications that piracy still happen. There's things about, we talk about cheating in PC games, but we sometimes don't carry that conversation all the way to the point of, well, a big part of the reason that the person uses an aimbot is so that they can earn V-Bucks and Apex coins so that they can just buy the next season pass when it comes around without having to actually pay any money. There's a lot of things. So one of the culminating points is, as I've sat and watched a lot of the streaming community, a lot of it is about people who are searching for alternate forms of revenue. who aren't satisfied with where they are professionally, and are looking for alternate sources of revenue, and that can be articulated as people who make that revenue off of things, you could say, off of the backs of others, off of off of things that others create, and then never pay back into the industry in any way. Now, I am completely all for, and I get that there are people who can't, right? And I get that, but there's also a big problem that I have reconciling, right, with the attitude towards entitlement of, never paying in, but then complaining about, like, a gun in Fortnite being vaulted, right? So again, I've had a hard time trying to reconcile this, and a lot of it comes from social media. Um, so I guess, like, a couple of things that occurred to me today is, I was like, why? And we're gonna, like, between this and maybe a YouTube video that I'm gonna cut, I'm gonna um, lay out some numbers here, which normally I'm not. I try to keep heavily obfuscated, and I don't allow to leak out into the public domain. But you know, I personally spend, probably not probably, I spend about $1,000 a year on games. And that's just that's just content. That's not even to talk about hardware, right? Again, my expectation isn't that everybody does that, but I struggle a little bit with being around circles of people who claim that they love games. Never, this runs a spectrum of never pays full price to the spectrum of never pays for games at all. And again, the subscription models that are present now kind of muck with that a little bit. Um, and I struggle with people who claim that they love games, and that, in particular, I'll say Twitch, and will claim that Twitch is a community of people who loves games, when it's largely a community of people who don't want to pay for games. I mean, that is literally what a large part of the Twitch demographic is. And there's a reason why games that are high in popularity there include Fortnite and Apex, and not a lot of games that are big AAA retail releases. Um, so part of what I struggled with today, and this has been building up over the last few weeks, is, why would I continue to pay games and pay full price for games, which essentially subsidizes everybody else buying them at discount? Um, and then the other notion is, I stream what I play, and I stream, what I buy, and and the frustrating thing is, nobody wants to come see somebody play Resident Evil 2, which was a big critical release for this year, right? Um, they would rather go see somebody play Apex or Fortnite, right? Because Apex and Fortnite doesn't cost any money, and that's a thing that they're willing to play because it doesn't cost any money. So, a lot of these things just kind of culminated, and again, I've been, again, frustrated with a lot of things in social media. Not just that, but, like, somebody tried to start up the console war again in the last 24 hours. I had a thing of a person claiming that, Xbox is better than PS4, and talked about Microsoft being more. It was a flabbergasting statement. Talked about Sony being more corporate than Microsoft, and I was like, clearly you're a 20-something who doesn't know the history of Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates and stacked rankings and forced attrition. Like you're talking about things you don't understand. So let me wind it back a little bit, because this, I knew, and I've known this for weeks. I know that this conversation sounds like I just want to be around the haves and not be around the have-nots. What it's really about is, this show and live streaming for me and blogging and everything that I've been doing for the last 20 years has all been about trying to seek out and find people who want to have a deep, detailed conversation about games and the games industry. The four of us kind of came together because we wanted to have that conversation at a level of depth, and we agreed to continue doing it because we knew that we couldn't find that anywhere else. I have always held on to the belief, while we've been all embarked on this starship for like the last however many years we've been doing it, in the belief that there were others out there. And I guess I just hit the point this week where I'm like, I don't know that there are, right? And I'm sure that there are, but like I I just hit a point where I'm like, I don't. Where are they? Like I feel like this is The Walking Dead, and I'm just broadcasting like the same message on the walkie-talkie, right? And the reality is there's nobody out there. So when we talk about who we are, right, demographically, and we talk about, look, we're people who play on multiple systems across multiple genres and love games and love the emerging and evolving nature of the industry and the art form. And that is not what the conversation about games is about in social media and largely at all today. Like like we're still struggling to find the other people who listen to Kind of Funny Games and Game Scoop and the GI show, right? I don't know where these people are. Um, and I would have expected that I would have come across them in social media or in the streaming community, but that's not the conversation that's being had there. And I just hit again kind of a I look at I look at all of my compatriots who I used to work with who are reviewing like television shows and movies, and I'm like, that community and those people, they are paying for the DC EU streaming service, right? And I can't even remember how much that is a year. These people are pumped to pay money for the Disney streaming service, right? Like, these are people who are ascribing uh, the perceived value that they feel for the content that they're willing to consume. So to wrap up, let me swing back to that, because that's actually where this whole thing kind of started this morning. All of this started this morning because an analyst who I think he works for the NPD group that I follow on Twitter tweeted two things this morning. I don't think I can get back to him right now, but what he mentioned is he was talking about streaming services, not streamers. He was talking about streaming services, and he said, streaming services have the chance to streaming video game services like the Netflix of video games have the chance to really change the landscape. But the problem that those companies are going to encounter is, how do you strategically get the 50% of the market that pays $0 for games to understand the value add of paying $10 a month for a streaming service, right? Like so there's a risk that part of the big stratagem of the streaming services is, hey, because we think that there are people who want to play games who don't, because of the entry cost of having to buy a $300 and above console, much less an $800 or above gaming PC. We think if we remove the hardware investment barrier for them, that they're going to be interested in playing games. But the risk is that they're not. The risk is that 50% of the market, even if they have the console, still feels like games are of no value to them. And that's a problem that I have, because like he was saying, and I think his name is Matt Piscatella. I'm not sure if I'm getting the last name right without looking at it, but what the problem is that when we choose to pay for a game or decide to not pay for a game, we are ascribing a dollar value to that content, and that's the signal we're sending the industry. And so if you go and you pay $60 for a game, you're telling them it's worth 60. If you go pay 50, it's worth 30. If you pay nothing and you solidly lock in at that, then that's the signal that's being transmitted, and that's a significant signal today. The other thing that he mentioned in his tweet was, that 50% of the market is tightly bound to the notion of the free to play model, and they consume a large amount of content sticking at that free floor and not wanting to pay anything else in. And then the last thing that I saw was, which I kind of glommed onto and kind of repeated here, was a British guy who's, I think is a streamer, not a very big streamer, but talked about how, yeah, his frustration is how in his conversations it's constantly people who don't pay anything for video games but feel entitled but still feel entitled to that content. Like, don't pay anything for Fortnite, but feel like they are entitled, right? Because they play the game a lot, feel like they're entitled to all of the content that Fortnite offers. Or in my case, my problem with it is feel entitled to complain about all the content that Epic provides. So I know I rattled on for a long time. I apologize about that. Obviously, that's some heavy stuff I needed to get off of my chest.
Yeah, don't apologize for it, right? I mean, I think that is part of the show, is to give us a platform to have these discussions. Yeah, there's a lot here to potentially unpack, and I don't know that we'll spend the entire show on this, but I do want to take a few moments to unpack a little bit of this. Is I think you're right on Matt Pescatella. He is an NPD analyst, and the out of all the things you said, the 50% number of people that don't pay for games is kind of a shocking amount, right? I mean, it's a drastic shift from where the industry was 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, but more than that, right?
And just, I mean, I don't take that at face value. I think Piscatella was just kind of hand waving and saying, like, at, on an order of magnitude, like it's kind of like that. I don't think he actually had statistics to back that up. But
it could be, all right, if you look at just like registered user numbers.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely
the
could be.
reason
Yep.
that Fortnite is as high as it is, or League of Legends is as high as it is, right? I mean, those are insane amount of registered users because of the free-to-play nature of it, where we jump up and down when a title hits 5 million sales for a physical sale, right? I mean, so there is a scale there that is different when the barrier of entry is so low. At first I was thinking, okay, so this idea of not investing in the industry, right? I agree with you. We are I would hope to think that we're not unique, but the more you talk, the more that we're out here, the more that potentially we are, right? The idea of, yeah, last year I spent just shy of $1,000 on games, right? And that is, I choose to invest in that. That is my entertainment. But at the same time, there are people out there that for decades they pick up Madden, they pick up Call of Duty, they picked up Halo, and they played it for half a year or more. And maybe because there was an initial investment cost, that we didn't think about those people in the same way that we think about uh, uh, people picking up and downloading Fortnite or League or anything else. And maybe it's also because Twitch as a platform didn't exist to such a degree, right? The transparent nature of that, the economic model there is drastically different. People played games at that stage. They picked up Halo and they picked up Call of Duty and they picked up Madden to play for a year because they liked it, not because they were either hoping to get paid for it or hoping to get an investment that would allow them to be paid for it, right? I mean, I think that shifts the idea of playing for enjoyment versus playing to supplement your income. I think certainly does have the potential to shift who's playing and why they're playing and what they're trying to derive out of it, right? I mean, suddenly, and this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but potentially, and suddenly the shift with Twitch means that anybody can be Mystery Science Theater and repurpose a game and have people stream over the top of it, right? That the idea of Mystery Science Theater 20 years ago was people watching people watch a movie and comment over it. And now we've got Let's Plays and Twitch streams that more or less do some of the same things? Is that an exaggeration, or is that taking a different lens to this media here?
No, I think that's a valid part of it. I mean, the thing is, it democratizes and it empowers not necessarily anyone, but a lot of people um to it's an enabler to a lot of people to go out and create content, right? Which can potentially be a revenue stream for them. I mean, I guess, and I know Swiss like disagrees with this hypothesis, but so I mean, this is definitely a result of the evil intermix um, of a revenue stream that is highly accessible in combination with the volume that can be achieved through promulgation and social media, right? Like you said, DBQ, there's always been people who bought an Xbox, bought a PlayStation, and pretty much only bought 3 games a year. And to be quite honestly, I don't have that doesn't stick in my craw at all. There have been, I mean, my brother was one of them. There have been people who have bought their PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, and only ever bought used games from GameStop. Um, in a lot of those cases for financial limitations. That isn't a thing that I necessarily have a problem with. Where I start to like want to backpedal away from the community, and I've long been a person who like I dislike this notion of gaming community because it's a label that gets thrown around, and in a lot of cases it gets thrown around topically in a manner where I go, no, 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 don't throw me into that group because that's not what I do, right? That's not what I'm about. Um, so a large part of the problem for me of where I want to backpedal away from it is it's it's a purchasing paradigm that in my mind is almost it's almost an aggressive count, like this conversation on Twitter about people who refuse to ever pay for games. It almost felt it was voiced as if it were a counterinsurgency, like it was a proletariat uprising to deliberately diminish the value of games in the market. And that is a problem. That's the thing that I have an extreme problem with. Um, and like people who deliberately laid off games in an effort to deliberately drive the price down. Other comments in there like, yeah, I never get hyped for a game. I'm like, you can't say that you never like no game ever makes you pumped to play it, and then concurrently claim that you're a lover of games and concurrently claim that you're part of a large community that loves games. I'm like, you don't love games. Like you like if you accept it as an art form or an entertainment form, like if it never appeals to you emotionally, you don't love games, and you can't stand in that group and claim that you do. And the fact that some people do make those hypocritical statements and cross those signals is a thing that just really just makes me like not want to be like a part. So, um, like I said, I was going to say, I know Swiss doesn't like this hypothesis. I think part of it might be because he didn't live through it, but the video game recession of 1983, the industry went away. There weren't things to buy. The only things that were on the market were the things that had come out like years before, and we all waited to see if this industry. I mean, quite frankly, at that time, like just given the history, as far as any of us were concerned at the time who were living through it, it was never coming back, right? It was a fad.
Yeah, it was just a fad, right? It was there,
Right.
and now it got regulated to an arcade in the corner of this one store downtown.
Right. So if the industry is really at a point, even at a hand wavy order of magnitude, where half of the market isn't paying in, that's not sustainable, right? As an economic model. And I know, and again, in this conversation on Twitter, then a lot of people were like, "Oh, here come the people claiming that like this is why we have microtransactions." I'm like, "Yeah, this is why we have microtransactions. We have crunch because because social media holds a certain amount of power, because people, the gaming community writ large, is never satisfied. And so publishers and developers keep trying to scale games to new heights. The costs of production increase. And I know people like to say, well, that's not true. No, dude, like, I'm a software engineer. I do cost estimates for software development. Bodies cost more money. And so when the production team of a game scales to 110, 150, 200 people, when Ubisoft can't put it together, like the only way Ubisoft puts together some of its games is because it it has a collaboration fabric that allows people who are in multiple development shops around the world to work together. Otherwise, you would have to build a stinking Apple campus and have 1,000 developers in one physical location. Still, remote collaboration costs. It costs in bandwidth. It costs in storage. It costs in backup and disaster recovery. It costs in additional layers of management to coordinate all that. When those things are rising and you have people who refuse to pay the $60 value, and I don't know that $60 is the right number. Obviously, there's margin in that. I'll talk about that here in a second too. Like, that's not a sustainable model. And so, yes, that is part of the reason why there are microtransactions and season passes, because the economic model was becoming unsustainable. By the way, for people who don't understand it as well, when you roll into the next fiscal year for a gaming company, you build your budget around what you're going to develop at the publisher level, right? Because you're allocating funds down to development studios to build games. That's capital. Capital comes out of margin. It doesn't just exist, right? It comes from margin, or it comes from investors. And so, in order to have a $20 million budget for development for the following fiscal year, that's capital. And the only way to get that is out of margin from the preceding year's sales, right? So again, refusing to ever pay market value for a game, whatever that market value is just, again, a thing that creates a limited resource pool to build out the next year's games.
Well, I think the other thing too is when we're talking about these games and the money, game prices haven't changed in what, 2-3 generations now?
Yeah.
I mean, and like you're saying, these things are getting bigger and bigger, and they can't. At some point, they're going to have to start hiking out prices or do something. Obviously, microtransactions is helping now. Excuse me, but I mean, it's just ridiculous when you think about it that way. Which is, obviously, I hadn't thought about it, in a while. That prices have been $60 now for, however many years now. So.
Right, so they were $60 for console generations 7 and 8, and I think console generation 6 they were $50. So there was only like a $10 bump up.
Yeah.
From PS2 Xbox to PS3 Xbox 360.
Yep, 360 was the one that first kind of pushed that $60 mark.
Yeah. So yeah, that's like 15 years of the gaming industry, right? That the cost of a game has been relatively static. So yeah, so that's just where I was and why, and like I said,
yeah,
why.
No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think there's a lot there. There's still more there to discuss. I do think, and I think that actually this spring is a good indication of this, not only in terms of social media, but in terms of kind of where we are game landscape wise, right? Like the idea that people are chasing what you're describing, Agasicles, that people are hoping for that streamable game. People are, indie studios are trying to make it big by creating a game mechanic that is favorable to streaming, that you have big game studios like EA pushing out Apex Legend, paying people $50,000, to play that game, and then struggling now when the hype around it dies off, when the shine of the new it goes away. You also have games that have struggled with giant budgets, right? The idea of pricing, and you've got potentially Days Gone, although the UK charts seem to be doing okay for it, but you certainly have Anthem this year that has struggled as well. Of big name, big developer, big studio, AAA, multi-year investments that are struggling to recoup costs when we are paying the same amount that we were 2 generations ago. I think that those are all very good points.
Yeah, and so just to close it up, this is not me saying that everybody needs to go out and pay full price for games all the time. That's not what I'm saying. This is not me saying you shouldn't hunt sales, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't go out and buy like a big bushel of games at $5 a pop on Black Friday, or buy games when the Steam Summer Sale comes around, or whatever, right? All I'm saying is, if you love a game and you really like, and you really want that style of game to persist, right? There are things that I buy on the Switch because I want those games to come to the Switch. I'm going to go buy Titan Quest on Switch because that is a game genre that I think, without people paying for it, somebody's going to go, oh, well, screw that. Why would I ever put that on the Switch, right? If a flight sim comes out and it's good, I go pay for that because I want flight sims on PC, right? Because they don't make them anymore. Great racing games come out. I go and I pay for great racing games, right? A game comes out that's not solidly in my wheelhouse, right? A survival horror game, sure, I lay off of that and I buy that at a discount because I don't know that I'm going to get all my ROI out of that. I and I know, like, I do the VR show with him, and I love Gray, but I disagree with him when he says don't ever, he says don't ever buy a VR game at full price. Now, granted, some of that's because the quality these days are hit and miss, but I'm like, but if you love VR games and you want more of them, at some point you got to pay full price for them. So I guess what I'm saying at a minimum is, I would suggest that, and again, I know it's hard, but I would suggest that if you love a thing, pick and choose some targets where you're gonna pay full price for it. And if you can't pay full price for it, pay for it when I guess I would say, like, when when it's first available, when it first crosses your threshold of what you can afford. But the I'm gonna stick it to the man and like shuck and jive and deliberately not never pay more than $5 or $10 for a game. That's like, you're just at a certain point, the things aren't going to exist, right? And I've been around long enough to see things that I love go away because people didn't buy them. We don't have flight sims now because people didn't buy them. We don't have as many racing games now because people didn't buy them. Nobody builds. I have a problem with my wheel and pedals, and like, there's nothing available else out on the market to buy now because companies don't make them. Adventure games went away for a while. RTSs are largely not around, right? Because they were superseded and people don't buy them. In the world of tech, I loved hardware keyboard smartphones, and like, they're not made anymore because people stop buying. Like, so if you love a thing, it's gonna go away if you don't tell them, if you don't send signals to the market telling them that those things are of value. You can decide where in that scale is appropriate for you to do that, but if your objective is to get a steal every single time, then eventually that thing is going to go away.
Yeah. So so I sigh here as someone who spent most of the last generation hunting deals and reselling games in order to be able to afford that, because that's where I was financially, that my family was not in a place that I could afford to do that. But your point is absolutely correct, that if this is something that you value, that if there is, I think we all do this in a variety of ways, regardless of the media, regardless of things, we end up putting our money where we value things. And for some people at different points in times in their lives, that margin may be razor thin, but you still value, a night out with your family at a fast food restaurant because that's what you can afford, or you value a night at the movies, or you value a brand new video game because you're going to get a lot of enjoyment out of it, right? I think that is a good point for all of us to consider, is that if there's something out there, regardless of that medium, that we receive some value from, that we should put some value back toward it as well. So, and I did that exactly. I'm going to use this as a transition, gentlemen, because we are eating through our time here today for this discussion, but I'm glad. Thank you, Agasicles. I'm glad for this discussion. But today, gentlemen, I put my value on a brand new release game. I put my value in Sonic Eraser for the Switch, not only because it's on the Switch, and I'll tell you already, I'm sure that it looks better on PS4 and Xbox One. At least blown up on a big 1080p 55-inch TV. On the handheld, it looks really sweet. But again, I bought it on launch day. It's $40. I'm sure it's going to go on sale. Actually, on Amazon yesterday, you could have bought it for $33 pre-launch. But I'm buying it on Switch because, one, this is the type of game that I want on Switch. This is also a type of game that I want to exist. I want a fun kart racer. I want to be able to sit down and have a smile on my face because of just some dumb fun. And actually, it's a really smart kart racer. So it does some really cool things that other kart racers haven't, to my awareness. It sticks everybody in a team, regardless if you're playing by yourself, and it throws you in with some AI. There's some cool team mechanics there. The person in the lead leaves a trail behind them, and if you drift into it, you'll get a speed boost. You can slingshot past them with some additional speed boosts. If you have a player teammate who's spun out, if you zip past them and kind of closely side swipe them, you'll give them a recovery boost and allow them to come back in. You can also pick up items and offer them up to your team, or your team can offer things to you, so you can get additional items if you missed a box, or if you're lagging behind or you're in first place and you're never going to use that certain item that you always get. Give it off to a teammate. So it does some smart things here within the genre that not a lot have, and it's a pretty competent racer. It's a pretty competent kart racer, right? You get your drift, you get a number of classes. But again, I've played a little bit of the story mode. I've played a couple of exposition and some Grand Prix just this evening, and it's surprisingly a solid game again. Not surprisingly, because Sumo Digital did some good stuff with Sonic All-Star and Sonic Transformed.
So how does it stack up to Mario Kart?
So after a day, I don't know that I can. I guess I would say that visually on the Switch, I haven't seen any kart racer that touches Mario Kart. Just in terms of, the art design and the way that it renders. Mario Kart is a beautiful looking game on Switch, regardless of how you're playing it. I think the problem for me with Mario Kart 8 has always been, after a night or two of playing, I feel like I've unlocked everything meaningful in terms of characters, and if I get a certain set of wheels or a glider, I don't know that I feel super passionately about that. Here with the story mode, it seems like there's going to be some more to play through. There is a lot of wheels and body boosts and other types of things that will you unlock along the way. There's some pieces there where you earn credits and you get a little randomized item that will unlock for your vehicle. So there's some things in terms of hooks that can keep you there. I think if you're a new Switch owner and you're looking for a kart racer, you're probably going to get a more polished experience out of Mario Kart 8. If you're on Xbox or PlayStation and you're looking for a kart racer, this is a really solid option when you don't have Mario Kart. And I would also say that if for those people that enjoyed Mario Kart 2 years ago when it came out, pick this up. That there is a lot here. I'm also going to be really curious to see what Sonic Racing, not Sonic Racing, but Crash Nitro Kart, the reboot, the remaster, looks like. But this is a game from Sumo Digital that has done some really solid work with also Transformed. And for me, actually, I know that this is a game I'm going to be playing throughout the summer because it's got those kind of kart mechanics, and it's got a little bit of an adventure mode to it that gives me a reason to engage with it more than Mario did.
So did you play Mario Tennis?
No, my son played Mario Tennis a little bit, and I never got into it. He fell off of it after a couple of weeks.
Okay, I was just wondering because I was wondering if it was story mode like that, or if it's like an actual like fully fleshed out. Like, is it? And I guess you only played like a day or two, but is it just is the story just getting you to the next race, or is it actually like kind of involved?
No, I guess I wouldn't call it I wouldn't call it a story mode. I would call it an adventure mode, right? Like there is an overworld map, kind of linear in terms of think of think of Mario 3, right? Like you're moving from point to point. There's going to be some branching times if you collect enough stars, or if you meet certain win conditions in a race, you'll get a key that'll unlock a gate to a unique world or a unique condition. Um, so I wouldn't call it like a story mode. Like, I mean, technically there's some cutscenes and some voice acting, and unless you're really a Sonic fan, I don't know that you're going to get a whole lot out of that. Um, I can't.
Not a lot more.
I can let you know, according to my son, that it is the same voice actors from other things, so that's good. But the idea of being able to hit a branching path, choose a couple different tracks, to have some win conditions. Some of them looked pretty tough in terms of collecting 100 coins on 100 rings on a race. Which means if you spin out, you lose some of them. So there's some win conditions there that would allow and open up some other things. So almost more of like a challenge map more than a story mode, but a reason to engage with it as a single player. And I think the team adventure part, at least for families or for friends who can play local multiplayer, it adds a whole different dynamic than Mario Kart's teams, where you got points if you were on the blue team or the red team. This here with some of the mechanics adds a little bit more strategy to it than I've seen in a kart racer. So I'm going to keep moving on, and we're going to go to another more recent game that has come out, not quite as recently as today, but Osiris Prime, you've been playing, and you were not here last week to give us your rundown on Mortal Kombat 11. So let's go ahead and jump to that. So what platform are you playing it on? And you played it for the last podcast, but are you still playing it now?
Yes, I have actually been playing this since it has been released, and so what's that, about 3 weeks now, maybe 4 weeks or so. And it's pretty good for me, especially for a fighting game. So what's keeping me in this game? And let me just say first off, the very first 2019 game story mode that I've beaten is Mortal Kombat 11. I don't know if that's good or bad, but yeah, actually, it's the story mode that's actually kept me playing this game. It's kind of more like just like you're watching a movie, and then you get to interact with it. Every so often, you get to do the fight scenes, but the the cutscenes and stuff, they're really good. I mean, the voice acting is good, the animation is good. Obviously, it's not, I don't know, I'm playing on Switch, excuse me. So it's not, obviously the huge, greatest quality, but I mean, I think it still looks good. I've been playing handheld, I've been playing, docked. I've done both, and it, plays pretty well. The actual graphics, like when you're fighting, you can kind of see like kind of the outlines of the characters and kind of a little bit of I don't want to say like pixelation, kind of like around the edges too. But I mean, it's a beautiful game even on the Switch. And I picked it mostly because obviously the portability. I can play it anywhere. I can play it at work. I can play it, on the go or whatever. So, yeah. But I mean, the story mode just really kept me in it. I did play a little bit of X before this, and that was pretty good too. And that was the first Mortal Kombat I think I've played for a long time, since like probably the GameCube maybe or so. I hadn't really touched them too much since then. But yeah, I've been really. It was a really great experience going through that story mode. So I mean, I really enjoyed it. I played a little bit of the Towers, which is another game mode. It's basically you're just going up fighting people, and evidently there's like, I guess it's kind of like another story mode where it actually tells the story of like the person, whoever you pick. Like, I guess there's like a little end sequence, kind of like in the old games where you beat the game and there's like a little animation or just a little story afterwards. But I haven't beat any of those yet because they're very hard. And actually, in these towers, or at least the tower I'm doing, because there's like multiple ones you can choose from, you can like use power ups and stuff like that. Which I kind of knew there was power ups there, but I didn't realize that you actually have to use these power ups when you get to the end boss. Another thing I forgot to mention on the story mode, gentlemen, this might come as a shock to you, but I'm getting old because I had to put it back on easy to beat the story mode because the end boss, I think, well, I'll say her name. Her name is Chronica. She was just like tough as nail. I could not
Yeah,
beat her.
that boss is out there. I mean, the name is out there in
Yeah,
terms of
I
yep.
just could not beat her on medium, which is what that's like the default. Obviously it's the default for most games, but it's the default I usually play on. And I couldn't get past her. I was playing for like a couple days, and I was just like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I just want to get past it. So threw it down to easy. I finally beat it. I'm gonna try to go back and try to defeat her. Now in the story mode, you can't pick. As far as I can tell, you can't pick like who you can choose like to fight. It just kind of does it for you because obviously it's following the story, which is kind of cool because if you're in a section where it's like Liu Kang, let's say, um, and you just pick Sub Zero all of a sudden, that'd be kind of weird. It kind of take you out of everything. I mean, I know some people kind of poo poo on like the story mode or the cutscenes, like they say that it takes you out of the story, but in this case, it always kept me in there. So, but yeah, I mean, I had to throw it down to easy, but.
Well, I think the way they do their story and the way you described it is pretty accurate, right? Like it's the same as it's been for the last couple Mortal Kombat's, the same as it's been in Injustice, where you're jumping between. You see some really good cutscenes, and then you kind of transition quickly into a fight. That's the way they settle a dispute, right? It really is. NetherRealms really has done a good job of staging a story around a fighting game.
Yeah, and, it goes in between the cutscenes and the fighting parts pretty nicely actually. So it's not like they're just standing there and all of a sudden it's like boom, it cuts to the fighting stances and stuff like that. It kind of transitions pretty well. So it's pretty nice how they do that. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. There were some issues I believe early on with the crypt, which is kind of like a third person. Kind of just like a walking simulator where you're just kind of going through and opening stuff and breaking stuff so you can kind of unlock stuff. I guess there's some breaking bug where if you equipped a certain item, it would I think you'd lose your save or it would lock up your system or something like that. But looks like they fixed all that kind of stuff. So, and I haven't heard of any other major problems since then. But yeah, I'm still enjoying it. I'm actually still playing it because I'm doing what I used to do in fighting games as well. I'd go through each person, and then in this case, maybe I'll try to do that through the towers. But really, I'm just going through each person to do their fatalities because I haven't. The one thing I don't like about nowadays is in all these websites is they show you the fatalities like beforehand, like even before the game even came out, like they already had like, oh here's all the fatalities you can. I don't want to see the fatalities. There's no point in me even buying the game if you're going to show me the fatalities. So I'm going through and kind of doing all the fatalities that I've unlocked so far because I think you get like one by default and then you can unlock the other one. So I'm starting to do that now. So, but yeah, I'm having a great time so far in Mortal Kombat.
Cool. I'm glad you've stuck with it. Right. That's really neat. And I've heard amazing things about the single player story. So that's cool to hear that it's hung with you. So I'm going to move on to another game that's hung with some people, or at least people have come back to in the last week here as the first raid ever has launched for the Division. Agasicles, you picked up the Division 2. I own it on Xbox, but you picked it up over on PC. How are you finding it so far?
Very good. And I also listened to a bit of the Ubisoft financials recently, which dovetail right along with the purchase, indicating that their PC sales, at least through Uplay, were up like 27% year over year. And I think that they're doing great things with bringing all of their open world games to PC. Where arguably maybe they play best. But yeah, this is and I generally have not been a super huge fan of third person shooters, third person action adventure games. But more specifically third person shooters, I just don't click with the mechanic as well as for that first person view. The original Division, I had problems with it. I really had problems with it understanding the progression model. And I've talked a lot about how, like, with an Ubisoft open world game, the big thing is probably in the first 6 to 8 hours, the biggest hill to climb is like you need to decide how you're gonna proceed through the game. Like like the percentage of time that you're going to go after certain objectives, understanding the difference in the objectives, understanding how the rewards differentiate between each, um, how you're going to approach completing however much of the game you're going to complete. That was a thing that I latched into with Far Cry 5, and it vastly increased my enjoyment of that game. Whereas with something like Infamous, like the first time through Infamous Second Son, like I didn't really settle in on like how am I going to play this from a campaign perspective. And it definitely negatively impacted my enjoyment of that game. This one, Division 2, lays that out in a very understandable framework to me. Rewards are fairly quick. I did not feel, I even feel like Destiny 2 takes a while to get the gears going on starting to give you drops and rewards that feel significant and like they matter. That happens immediately with the Division 2. By the way, absolutely from a game design perspective, best onboarding into an open world game that I've ever experienced. You were literally in a firefight, I would say within 120 seconds, probably less of game start. Like the game comes up, you get a quick bit of exposition, somebody puts a gun in your hand, and you're immediately under fire. Um,
No, I agree with you, right? I mean, I would say that it doesn't really give you a whole lot of narrative reason, but it's certainly in terms of a gameplay, and I think it does this throughout, that it gives you reasons and it keeps propelling you forward.
yeah.
From a gameplay perspective, that there's always something more to unlock. There are base resources to collect and support. There's a ton there to do. Whether or not they give you a driving reason to do them from a narrative reason, but I think it's the enjoyment of the world and the exploration of the world that has really given me a lot of gameplay out of it.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned is perfectly tuned in terms of maybe older gameplay designs that we hearken to, which is don't tell me everything. Give me some blanks to fill in. Let me build my own narrative. This game does that. It's very much kind of like my favorite RTSs were RTSs that just had conquer the world mode. Like didn't try and hem me up by giving me a bunch of constraints from mission to mission, but just said, here's a map, here are your starting resources, go out and conquer the world. The story will emerge as you proceed along. And as I would play through an open world, like Conquer the World mode RTS, I would develop factions that I disliked more than others, factions that I was okay with. Like it would all kind of unfold on its own. This game is kind of similar, where it's kind of conquer the world. It's like take over sector by sector. You get missions along the way, but like one of the things I did was I was like, oh, I need to go rescue like this person's daughter, but then I'm also going to progressively do tasks in this section of the map until I quell a lot of the chaos. One of the things I love is that even without multiplayer, those events where you pop your flare and allied forces reinforcements start to arrive. Um, so I felt like that was refreshing. One of the things, a couple of the negatives. One, uh, probably my most significant one was I bought the game, bought it on Epic, got a download from the Epic launcher. That download is not the game. That download is an installation executable, and there's nothing that really tells you that that's what's happening. So after I downloaded that, you then had to run that to actually install the game, and it still pulled down more files. So I went into it knowing that the word on the street was that the install was about 100 gigs on PC. The thing that I pulled down was about 40. I was like, oh, that's weird. And then I went up to play. This was at the start of a live stream. I go to double click the button and it goes ready to install. So this is the PlayStation 4 head fake that really bends me out of shape. So I was quite disappointed with that user experience. Then the other thing is that I didn't fully understand is this game cannot be played in any kind of offline mode whatsoever. If the servers go down, the game can't be played. And that's very frustrating. And again, I kind of discovered that in real time during a live stream, which was I was not quite pleased about. But other than that, the game just this is my 2019 Far Cry 5. It hits every drum beat that I'm looking for. It's wonderfully enjoyable. It's a grindy kind of game that I'm going to be able to go back to in almost limitless fashion. With always stuff to do. I can hit it for 30 minutes or I can hit it for 3 hours. Well played, Ubisoft.
Yeah, no, I need to go back to it. Actually, I played it for the first couple of weeks and then kind of fell off of it for other things. But I totally agree with your experience. Right, there's a lot of emergent gameplay and story. There is, I think I made a lot of story in terms of connections and kind of narrative as I went because of those interactions, very similar to what you were talking about, some of those older strategy games where you're the one kind of creating those story beats along the way. But yes, yeah, go ahead.
The one other negative that I'll mention is, and I don't know if this was operator error or the way it is, the first time as far as I can tell, until I went in and set my privacy settings, it seemed like I got auto pulled into a group. So I was in the geographic vicinity with somebody who was forming up a group. I may have mistakenly rapidly clicked because I was messing around. I was trying to click on something in the UI. I may have mistakenly accepted an invite or something, just like it may have popped and I may have clicked it when I was trying to click something else. But it was a jarring experience. But then I was like, oh, let me go. There are privacy settings where you can set yourself to basically not be joinable. But unfortunately, I had to learn that after I got kind of, and it was a rough night. I was like 80% done with the first mission. And when you get auto pulled for a group, it does not, like, there's no checkpoint. Like, you go back and play the whole mission over.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, I've played through a couple of those missions multiple times.
Yeah.
But I think that is more of a setting piece because I've been soloing and have not been auto pulled. I've also played with people. And I think the thing it does really well is, unlike the first game, it allows you to play with people of all different levels, and either you scale up or they scale. I played as a level 8 player. I was playing at level 29 because of the people I was playing with. So it really does allow you to kind of jump in and out with a variety of friends, squad mates, random people. It is designed very well for that. So yeah, hopefully this is something we can come back and talk about as well, because we are getting close to the end of our time. So tonight, gentlemen, I'm going to wrap this up here. This is normally our Picks Plays episode. I did not say this in the beginning, but this is episode 94. But today we normally have an assignment, but we did not have an assignment. That's the end of the school year for many people, so we were kind of on coast mode. But we've got an assignment coming up here this week, or 2 weeks from now. We'll be back. It'll be the first week in June, and it'll be right before E3, gentlemen. Can you believe that? I don't know that this can't be a better time for people who, as we said at the beginning of the episode, people who say that they love games and are engaged with the industry of gaming as well. So E3 we've got coming up in the second week of June 10th, 11th is when we start kicking some things off. So the assignment for all 4 of us for the next 2 weeks, the next Picks Play show, is to go back and play a game from a franchise that you are hoping that there is an announcement about at E3. Whether this is a reboot, a sequel, some type of remaster, whether it is maybe even something in the same vein of a game that has existed prior to this, right? We've got some games that we know are going to be there. We know some games that are not going to be there. But here's our chance to go back and revisit some games that we hope might show up there and why. So that is our assignment for the week, gentlemen. Any final closing thoughts before we wrap this up here? Well, for myself, DBQ Hams, Agasicles, Stamos, and Osiris Prime, gentlemen, thank you for the frank and honest conversation tonight, and thank you, viewers and listeners, for joining us as well. I really hope that as you've you've heard our comments and if you heard Agasicles' thoughts and concerns, to join in that conversation, leave us a comment, hit us up on Twitter at the E2KG Network. We want to know where you're at with this. Again, this is potentially, this is a long conversation. This is a nuanced conversation, but that's hopefully what we try to do here on E2KG is not necessarily go for clicks, to go for hot takes, but we are here to engage in some long form conversations. So thank you for being with us during that, and we'll be back again next week with another deep dive, another time to dive into the industry that we love and to share it with you. So until then, this is always going to be enough to keep us going. Good night.